afternoon, everyone. My name is Robin Jeremy. I'm the Dean for the Coles College of Business, and we are so happy to see so many students here today for our Tetley Distinguished Leader Lecture Series. I'm not kidding when I say this is probably the largest Tetley event that we've ever hosted in the Coles College of Business, because we don't have a room as large as the number of people that are getting into this chat right now. So I'm thrilled to talk to you today and to introduce our wonderful leaders and guest speakers. A little bit about the Tetley Leader Series. It started in 1990, and it was founded by the Tetley Company, the CEO there, for a generous gift. And the intent was to bring people like Mr. Marcus that have such a wealth of experience in leadership to our students and to share his expertise and tips of wisdom that we can all gain and how to be best leaders ourselves. So without further ado, I want to introduce our speaker so you can hear more from him and then less from me. Mr. Marcus co-founded Home Depot, the world's largest home improvement retailer, and served as its inaugural CEO and chairman until his retirement in 2002. Over the last several decades, he has redirected his entrepreneurial spirit towards hundreds of charitable endeavors to solve big problems. He has given away more than $2 billion as a signatory on the Giving Pledge. Dr. Catherine Lewis is Assistant Vice President of Museums, Archives, and Rare Books, is the Interim Assistant Vice President for the KSU Library System, and Professor of History here at KSU, and an honorable member of the Coles College of Business. He is the author, co-author, and co-editor of 16 books, including Pick Up Some Dust with Mr. Brody Marcus. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming our two guests today.
Oh, Robin, thank you so much. I can't think of a better place to be than celebrating the Tetley with all of our students, staff, and faculty. And nobody is more fun than Bernie Marcus. So you guys are lucky to have him for lunch today. And Bernie, we're going to dive right in. And I'm going to start by asking you, because it is so much fun when we were writing this book. You had so many different jobs growing up. And they've influenced you in profound ways. Can you talk about just a few of those before we get to founding Home Depot?
Well, there were so many people, going back many years ago, I made it a habit to try to get to know or study people who were successful. And I tried to figure out, how come? I was a poor kid from Newark, New Jersey, had no money, probably had no support for our future or what, and I'd have to build it all by myself. But there were some people out there that started in similar circumstances, and they had success. They were the top of their show. They had substance behind them, and I wanted to know how the hell they do it. They started with the same thing I did, so I studied them, and I got to know them. And I have to tell you, if you were to ask me how many people influenced my life, I could say hundreds, good and bad. There were some jerks, some people who were really disgraceful and disgusting, but there were so many people who were innovating and full of energy and positive thinking, and they're the ones I tried to emulate. And that's the positive thinking about what you could do with your life and not blaming others for what happened to you. I mean, who am I going to blame because I was brought up in a tenement in Newark, New Jersey? My mother, I loved her. My father, I loved him. I can't blame them. I'm not going to blame God because he's been pretty good to me all these years. And so a lot of people go through life blaming everybody, for their own failures because they fall on their face. It's never their fault. It's always the other guy that did it to them. And I tried to remove that from myself and understand that you are who you are. and you create what you create, and you do it with your own brains. But there were a lot of people that had an impact on me. I'll mention some of them. George Shultz, ex-Secretary of State, who I met at an early age. I don't know, I must have met him 40 years ago. And how fortunate, kid from Newark, being associated with one of the great statesmen maybe of all time, somebody who we miss in today's environment. I mean, if we only had a George Shultz around us today, we wouldn't be in the troubles that we are around the world. But George was brilliant, and he was a real statesman. And when he said something, it had meaning, it had substance, it had a lot of thought behind it. He just didn't shoot his mouth off and let things roll out. There was always something behind it that was meaningful and something that had substance. And he taught me a lot about how to deal with people, because God knows he dealt with so many people, enemies, friends, representing the United States in I don't know how many roles he carried. He was Secretary of State, Secretary of Commerce, Secretary of so many things. I remember I was in office once, and he had all the chairs, and each chair had his name on it, and the secretary of what he was.
Right.
But he played a role in the United States government that was phenomenal, and we worked together on the Israel Democracy Institute in Israel. He had a real desire to help the state of Israel survive, and so did I. And so mutually we worked together, and he taught me not to be as explosive as I was. I was a bombastic guy. I would, make decisions, quickly and fast and do that. And George would always say, "Hold on a second. What was you thinking about this? How did you come to that conclusion?" Well, he didn't slow me down, but he forced me to think more about how I did things. Now, the people like George were a real positive influence on me. There were a lot of people who were negative influences on me. A guy by the name of Sandy Siegaloff, who came into my life, who was a monster, a true monster, just the opposite of George Shultz. George was a caring kind of human being. George thought about people, cared about people. Sandy Siegaloff didn't give a crap about people. He cared about his own success and how much money he was going to make. And he ran over people and treated people like dogs. And he ran his companies that way. And I worked with him when he ran, unfortunately, one of my companies. And I watched the way he worked. And my God, I said, if I ever run my company, which eventually was the Home Depot, don't ever do the following things. And they were what Sandy Siegaloff. So no, I learned from a negative, not a positive.
Oh, absolutely. So Bernie, if we put in context, so you were at Handy Dan when Siegaloff was hired to come in, Mr. Chapter 11, right? To come in and kind of put everything on the chopping block. But even before then, people might be surprised to know that you are trained as a pharmacist and that you have done every job in the world. You have been a hypnotist, you have waited tables, you have cleaned bathrooms, you've worked in a bowling alley, right? And I always tell my students that it's the learning outside the classroom in some ways that makes the biggest difference. But when Sandy came into your life, in some ways, he's probably the most influential person because he fires you at 49, right? You and Arthur Blank and that whole crew from Handy Dan. So how did being fired, which looked like a failure, prompt you to start Home Depot?
Well, after working for him, I decided that's it. I'm not working for anybody anymore. And these people held me back, and I was forced to run a company, not based on what I thought,
Mhm.
but on what they thought. And so, fortunately, in my travels, I met a guy by the name of Ken Langone, and I know when I was fired, uh, and it was not for a due cause. I was fired because he wanted to get rid of me, and I remember when I spoke to Kenny, looking for him to give me pity, and say, "Poor Bernie, I'm sorry." Kenny said, "You just been hit in the ass with a golden horseshoe.
Right.
Why don't we open the store that you told me about years ago?" And years ago, I had been traveling through Houston with Kenny, and we're opening up Handy Dan stores. And Handy Dan was a small version of Home Depot. And I said to Kenny, one day somebody's going to open a store that's going to put all these stores out of business, including Handy Dan. And Kenny said, "Well, what is it?" I said, "I'm not going to share with you because it's in my mind. It's what I've been thinking about and strategically thinking about and how I can get it open." And Kenny said, "Let's do it." So if you read the book, Kick Up Some Dust, you'll find out what really happened. I tell the story, but Kenny made a lot of money on Handy Dan, and I got fired. And 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 Kenny had his investors invest in Arthur and myself
Right.
to open this new entity, which is called Home Depot. And they put up $2 million, and they said, "Go for it." And fortunately, it turned out to be a pretty good company.
I think a great company. And Bernie, for those of you who know the story of Home Depot, starts out with 2 stores, right? 1978, 1979. And Bernie, you and I talked for many, many hours about the kind of customer service that you wanted to do. And I'm looking at the chat as people are coming in. We have almost 400 people on the call, Bernie. I know people are great Home Depot fans, but Home Depot was different than so many companies, one for your customer service, but also for your social responsibility, that you very much created a company that gave back to the community. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it's Arthur and I were of the same mind about this, that first of all, we wanted to make sure that as we became successful, that all the people that work for us that were important to us. Remember, we opened 4 stores. We started with 2, then we had 4, then we had 8, then it went to 16. And we wanted all of these people that were working day and night. I mean, lots of hours. And they didn't have the government interfering with the hours, how many hours you could work. We had people working 16-hour days, and they deserved to benefit the way we did. And so I made sure that the board of directors at the earliest time put a provision in it. Arthur and I could never have stock options. Now, most companies, this is where the executives get rich and the associates and employees get nothing. We wanted to be the other way. They were our partners. Without them, I mean, think about it. We were sitting in Atlanta, Georgia, and we had stores in Florida, and they were making the sales and taking care of the customers and making the customers happy and actually doing everything possible to make a customer successful in what they were doing in their houses. And they deserve to participate in the wealth that we had. And I can't tell you, Catherine, to this day, we're estimating we between 15 to 30,000 millionaires
Right.
of people who had only high school education.
Mhm.
We had very few college graduates in those days. We had mostly high school, and they became successful and started to do the great things that they wanted to do. Now, at an early time, we had things happen in our stores where people couldn't afford to fix a hole in their roof.
Mhm.
And we devised a plan where our associates could, on their own time, take care of that roof. We would supply all the materials. And this is a way of giving back to the community. And then if there was a hurricane, a tornado, a flood, a fire, whatever, the company itself showed up. And I'll give you one very important,
Mhm.
Oklahoma City bombing,
Right.
which is the first terrorist attack we really had in the United States. And if you remember, in Oklahoma City, they blew up a building, and the city was totally unprepared for it. And I remember we had two stores in the area, and I remember I heard the news on the radio. I got into the office. I called one of the managers. He wasn't in there. I called the next manager. He wasn't there. And I said, what the hell is going on? We could have had associates in the building.
Right.
We could have had their families in the building. And why weren't they there? Well, I found out later that they weren't there because they called back and they said to me, you're going to fire us for what we did. And I said, what'd you do? And they said they loaded up their trucks. They came to the store, loaded the trucks with generators, tarpaulin, all kinds of tools, shovels, things that they knew, flashlights, all kinds of lighting. And they wrote them out and just gave them out to the rescuers who were just showing up at the scene.
Mhm.
So, and we had no idea what they gave away. They gave away our inventory and our assets, and they thought they're going to get fired. Instead of getting fired, we endorsed it and thought it's one of the great things that we had done, and it became part of our blood and soul. This is the way we operated from that point on. And when there was a hurricane or anything like that, we were prepared. We gave out things. Recently there was something, and I remember reading in the paper that Home Depot gave out water. It was a fire,
Mhm.
a large fire in a large area, and everybody else was charging $6 a bottle, and we were giving it out free. All the water that we had, and we had it stored up, ready for something like this. So Home Depot very quietly did things that people didn't know about, but they knew in a hurricane that hit New York. I forget the name of it.
Sandy.
Sandy.
Sandy. Yeah.
Afterwards, they came in and they asked people, and they said, what agency was the best agency to help you during this thing? Was it FEMA? Was it the state government, the city government? And ultimately, most of them answered it was Home Depot.
Indeed. So Bernie, I'm looking at the chat, and Westby Slade says the first stock I ever bought was Home Depot. And another participant, Skylar Franklin, said, Home Depot, you have the best Christmas trees. So it's a great company. I think many of us know it, many of us support it, and certainly being one of the most socially responsible. But Bernie, one of the most interesting things about your career, and I want to make sure that we have time for people to ask questions, and you'll see the Q&A section. If you guys want to ask Bernie a question, pop it in the Q&A, and we'll do that as we come through the program. But Bernie, you retire, right? Which is hard to believe. Bernie, you're never going to retire. But you make this really important pivot. You take all that entrepreneurial spirit, everything you used and learned in Home Depot, and turned it into the Marcus Foundation. And when Robin said at the beginning that you've given over $2 billion in the Marcus Foundation, I don't think people really understand what that means. The fact that there is Autism Speaks, the fact that we have research on macular degeneration, the fact that we have all this veteran support, there are literally hundreds and hundreds of organizations that you have not only supported, but you have shaped. So can you talk about why you didn't just start playing golf and take a cruise around the world? Why you felt like when you retired, you wanted to turn to philanthropy?
Well, my energy never stopped, and I was always
It's
interested
true.
in helping other people. By the way, there's a new one that just came out last week. You remember the Marcus Stroke Center?
Of course,
Uh,
Grady Hospital, right?
And with the Marcus Mobile Stroke Center,
Yes,
where we had ambulances that had CTs, scanners in them for people who had strokes,
right.
because the earlier you get to them, the more you save. They came out with a statistic of thousands of lives that we changed, where people lost their speech,
Right.
people lost their ability to ambulate, and those people were saved. So you think about that, just wow, a throw off from the Marcus Stroke Center, the mobile centers. We had ambulances at the airport. So flyers who had a stroke on a plane
Right.
would come right into our ambulance. They'd get a CT scan. They would be read by the doctors, and they knew how to treat them or get them immediately to Grady Hospital, where they perform a procedure of getting rid of the clot.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so it goes on and on. The Marcus Autism Center has just developed a tool which is going to be used all over the world, and we can diagnose autism at the age of 16 months to 30 months. I mean, you were talking about a window.
It's an eye
Well,
scan, right? That
Yeah,
you
well,
can
you could
scan your
change
eyes. Mhm.
you could change their lives actually,
Right.
because their brains are formative at this stage, and that will have an impact around the world and save millions of families from the hardship that they go through with autism. Many of these kids will end up back in regular schools.
Right.
People will never know they were autistic,
Right.
because
Well,
they'll be treated early on. So
and
there are a
Bernie,
lot. Yeah.
I was going to say, I don't mean to interrupt, but I was going to say, but both the Stroke Center and the autism work that you've done, I think for those who may not realize, not only have they been significant and Atlanta-based, but they've become the global standard for autism care and for stroke care. The work that happened at the Marcus Stroke Center is now a national and global protocol for stroke treatment in the
Yes.
same way that with autism. So one of your great strengths and skills, as I'm looking at all of the people on this call, many of you who are young entrepreneurs, is it's not enough to just invent something or start something. You've got to figure out how to scale it. So I know that's a big deal for you for your work with veterans, that we're not just serving Atlanta veterans, we want to serve nationally and make sure that everybody has the opportunity.
Yeah, well, it's not only veterans. Think about this. I was recently in a hospital, one of the famous hospitals in the world, not in Atlanta, in another
Right.
city.
Sure.
And I asked the neurologist that came to see me, what happens if somebody comes in with a concussion? How do you treat them? And he just looked at me with blank eyes. And he said, we don't have a treatment. This is one of the this is a place where if you have cancer of the nail, they have 50 specialists.
Right.
And here's a place, and I found out that this is the case all over the United States. There's no protocol for concussions. And the concussions lead to suicide if they're not treated well. And we're worried about veterans that have suicide, traumatic brain injury. That's what it's called.
Right.
They're policemen, there are firemen, there are doctors who have traumatic brain injury, who don't get treated. And in many cases, they end up committing suicide. And the amount of suicides has tripled over the last few years. It's really traveled down to young people. And the Avalon Action Network, which we started, that's what we're dealing with. We now have 9 hospitals that treat traumatic brain injury, but we also have 20 places where we deal with post-traumatic stress, which in many cases also leads to suicide. And we do it for veterans, but we do for first responders.
Right.
And anybody else is at risk. So it's probably the biggest project we ever tackled.
Right.
And I'm very happy to say that Arthur Blank joined me in this as a partner after all the years we were together. This is the first charity we've ever worked on together. And so I'm proud of the work that we do. I just don't want to stop. There's so much more to do.
Well, Bernie, you're only 94, so we've got plenty of time, right? That's been the best part of this book is watching you. And one of the hardest things about writing this book with you was every day we spoke, there was a new story, a new breakthrough, a new opportunity. And some point we just had to stop writing, right? But I'm looking at some of the questions, and one of them is related to a question you and I talk about a lot, which is Giorgio De Francesco. When things don't go your way, Bernie, when you fail, what makes you get back up again?
Well, that's very interesting. Most people fail.
Sure.
Most people, no matter where you are, somewhere you have a calamity in your life. And how you deal with it becomes very important. As I said before, there were people that lash out at who caused it to happen to them. They blame everybody. They're victims on everything in their life. They're victims. And that victim becomes strangler. It strangles their brain. And they can't really think well after that. And I say, what I learned in my life when I had setbacks was, what did you learn? What did you learn that you won't want to do again? And not repeat what happened to you. I never blamed anybody. Sandy Siegel fired me. I never should have worked for him. I mean, the truth is, it's my own fault. I should have left him early on. I didn't. So I learned never to be around people like him. You never want to be around a son of a bitch that doesn't believe what you believe, who has no soul, who has no character, who doesn't care about people. And I said, I'm going to be just the opposite. I'm going to care about people. I'm going to be involved with their lives. I'm going to try to make their lives better. And I'm going to listen to people. And all the things that Sandy did wrong are the things that I did right. And I learned from my failures why I was a failure. And I made sure it never happened to me again. So stop blaming everybody. Jeez, it's enough already. Stop being a goddamn victim on everything that happens to you. I remember a guy, I remember he was 6'5", walked into my office, big black guy, and he was with the advertising department at Home Depot. And he came in, and my door was always open. And he said, I want to report the fact that they were treating me badly because I'm black. And he proceeded to tell me stories. And I listened to him, and I said, you are one of the great assholes I've ever met in my life. I said, I wouldn't even have you around me. I said, you're a negative thinker. You're blaming them for your failure. I don't know how they ever hired you or how they kept you. And he was like shocked because I thought I was going to fall on my hands and knees, and beg for forgiveness. It was his fault, not anybody else's fault. I'm happy to tell you that he went on to become successful at Home Depot, left and became even more successful. And so he learned a lesson of to stop blaming other people. And I'm telling everybody out there, you make a mistake, stop, think about the mistake, think about what you did wrong, and don't ever do it again, and you'll be successful. And that's, by the way, it's a mantra at Home Depot. When I go through a store and I see something wrong, and I say, that's wrong, they don't say, well, Joe did it or somebody else did it. They say, I'll fix it.
Right. Well, and the do-it-yourself tagline if you've got the book or if you've seen the book, right? It's kick up some dust, lessons for thinking big, giving back, and doing it yourself. And I think we've heard about how the do-it-yourself piece works. Now, Bernie, I know something we talked about. Look at our millennials and our Gen Z, and many of who are on this call today, 400 of them on this call today. And a lot of people don't believe the American dream still exists. Now, you started your company in the 70s. World was different. So what would you say to somebody? I've got a question from someone in the chat from Penelope that says, is there anything, not Penelope, there's a different one that says, if I'm starting a second career, what advice would you give me? So both for millennials and for people who are trying a second career, how does the American dream and the belief in the American dream help?
Well, I think it's tougher today. The government doesn't work in your favor. In the 70s, I will tell you, the government wasn't an obstacle for us. Today it is. But entrepreneurs have a way of succeeding. And there are always people that stand out and always people that don't fall on their face. And there are always people that happen to always climb to the top of the hill. And we keep hearing about successes, about small businesses that become bigger businesses because it's leadership. And I want to tell you on leadership, if you don't have a good leader, you don't have a good business. And I don't care if it's a company, a college, a medical practice, a small business, a charity, whatever it is. When you have a weak leader, you have weak people. Now, what makes a good leader? And I think your people should want to hear that story.
Absolutely.
And the first thing is surround yourself with people who might be better than you and listen to them. And I mean, really listen, open your ears and listen. And many times, because you're the boss, you think you know everything. And the truth is, most of what I learned when I was at Home Depot was from people I never expected. I'd be walking through a store and I see some kid, an 18-year-old kid or 19-year-old kid, putting stuff on a shelf, and I would say, "Why? What's making your job hard?" And he would say, "I don't know why they don't do it this way." And I'd say, "Holy mackerel! What a great idea! That just saved us $10 million as a company." I would go back and implement it because it made sense. But the fact that I listened to him and did think about the fact that he was, down in lower management, didn't make any difference. His manager saw the same thing, never brought it to my attention. So many of the things that happen at Home Depot, I will tell you, came about because we listened to the customer, number one. We listened to our associates, number two, and that continues today. It's still the same way. The same rules are there. And as long as we keep following, Home Depot will continue to be the great company it is. It's still a great company. This company, when you join Home Depot, it's not a job, it's a career.
Absolutely.
And people join the company and basically rise through the ranks and become anything they want. And we talk about diversity, women, men, whatever color you are, we don't care. As long as you have the skills to take care of people, and as long as you have the skills to lead people. And we thrive on that. And it's amazing to me after all these years, I retired in 2002.
Right.
I go into a store, they still remember me. And they,
You are a legend.
they, like a rock star.
Absolutely. If you've never done a store walk with Bernie Marcus, you have missed out. That is one of the things, Bernie, that made your career so successful, is that you didn't sit up in a C-suite office, that you were constantly on the floor doing breakfast with Bernie, talking with associates, talking with customers. You have a great story about nails. Can you tell the story about being in the parking lot with the guy loading the lumber and noticing he had no nails?
Yeah, think about how this started and where it goes from there. So I was in a parking lot in California, and I was helping a guy load lumber into his truck. He didn't know who I was.
Right.
I didn't walk around with, CEO of the company.
Right.
And I said to him after a while, I said, "This stuff you don't have here, you don't have any nails. You're buying all this lumber." He says, "Oh, I don't buy nails from you." And I said, "How come?" He said, "Your nails are no good." I said, "What are you talking about?" He says, "They bend and I can't use them. And your people found a place for me to buy nails." I said, "Our people pointed out somebody to buy nails." Well, after he left, I went back in the store and I walked in the hardware department and I ran across a young guy and I said to him, and I looked at the nails and they're all stacked. Usually we have empty areas because people are buying things. I said, "We have a lot of nails here." He says, "Yeah, we don't sell them." I said, "What?" He says, "I tell customers not to buy them." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because they're crap." So I said, I ran over, I got the manager, I got a board, I got a hammer, I took the nail, I banged it, the thing bent. It was no good. And I couldn't believe that this could happen to Home Depot. And I couldn't believe that somebody didn't do something about it. Just by knowing that we'd sell nails, we just had the wrong vendor. And so by the next day, all the nails were removed from the store, every single nail. And we found a vendor. And within 3 days, we had a new vendor with great nails. And our people started to recommend nails again. Listen, I mean, there are so many things that you do wrong, you don't know about. All you have to do is listen and use your God-given brains that tell you in common sense that this is stupid.
Right. Well, Bernie, we've got a chat question. Raleigh Benchakrun says, "I'm a student at KSU as well as a Home Depot associate, store 1777. I'm always energetic to help everyone, even if I don't know the answer. what can I do at Home Depot to grow my career? What kind of advice would you give to someone who's already on the right path but wants to take the next step?
I think that the key is to always be at the best of your game, never slow down, and take customer service to the ultimate. Now, we recognize that's the key. Our company has grown because we taught people, we took care of people. People will go past 3 of our competitors to shop at Home Depot. And why do they do that? They do it because of our people. So keeping that going, you have to be part of it. You have to be somebody who operates the same way. Oh, the customer is never wrong. The customer needs help, and you have to do everything in your power to make that customer successful, even if it means not making a sale. Making a sale is not the answer. It's giving the customer the right product. And sometimes you go into a store, they try to sell you the most expensive thing, when in fact you don't need that. I can't tell you how many stories I hear about people coming into our store and saying they need to buy a new faucet. And our people say, you don't need a faucet. What you need is different parts that cost very little, and show them how to fix it. And they lose a big sale, but they didn't lose anything. They gained a customer.
Well,
and that's the key.
And you tell that story in the book about a guy on the golf course who comes up to you and says, Bernie, Home Depot is going to go under, right? And can you tell that quickly, that story? It's related to the faucet.
There was a key case. We were rained out. We were all sitting around lunch, and people started telling stories. And it got to Home Depot. And he got up and he said, look, I run a business, and you're going to go out of business. I'm selling your stock short. Now, that was a stupid guy. He lost a lot of money because he did sell it short. And he said, the reason for it is my faucet. I needed a new faucet. It was leaking. And I came to your store. I was prepared to spend $600, $300, $400, $500, whatever it was. And your people showed me how to fix it for $2.50. He says, that's no way to run a business. And I said, no, that's the way you run a business. I said, if you have a plumbing problem, where are you going to go? He says, Home Depot. I said, you're wrong and I'm right, because that's what made the Home Depot successful.
Customer for life.
Yeah. And that story happens every single day, all over the world, actually.
Well, and Bernie, a question from Terry Lowe is, you've addressed this implicitly, but what role do character and ethics play in business success?
Well, you can't play this game by cheating. How do you do it? I mean, maybe on Wall Street you could do it and cheat there. But there are companies that are successful on a mirage. They sell crap and they get away with it. We don't. We only carry products that we think are the best. Sometimes we're priced higher than the market because we carry a better product, but we stand by everything. Mm-hmm. If it's wrong, we take it back. And that's the key. You're never going to be unhappy. There are people that come to Home Depot and they could get the job done by somebody else, and they say, oh no, the reason I go to Home Depot, they make it well. They make it good. If anything happens, I bring it back. They fix it.
Right.
And that's ethics.
Right.
That's ethics. And we couldn't operate it any other way. We're very honest business people. We teach our people not to think in any way, shape, or form they want to cheat people. And our people think that way and stop us. if we do something stupid.
Well, there you are. Well, and then Bernie, as we go back to philanthropy, a lot of these same skills connect to that. So, for example, as you look at the various philanthropic endeavors, right? One of the things that Home Depot does, or rather that you've done with Home Depot stock and the Marcus Foundation, is look at potential opportunities, macular degeneration, cancer treatment. And you guys often fund things that other people will not fund. So you're the true entrepreneur. Why?
Uh, Well, Home Depot was an invention of my brain. So why not do it in other areas? If you see a need, then you try to fill the need. And sometimes the answer's not out there. You go find it, or you help generate it, or you find the people who could do that. And that's what we do. And remember, there are some things that we do that, people think that off the walls, like the Georgia Aquarium, which is now the
Yeah.
biggest aquarium in the world. And not only the biggest, it's the best aquarium in the world. And it's recognized to be that. The best, like Home Depot, it's the best. And people come from all over the world to see it. And we put an awful lot of money into it. It's a wonderfully run organization that's got everything for everybody. And it takes people's minds away from the ills of today, the things that they have to go through, and gives them, 6 hours of joy and happiness. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's pretty good.
There you are. Well, and another question from Alex. When you first started Home Depot, did you doubt it would become successful? Can you talk about the dollars in the parking lot?
Well, when we opened, we actually had a misfortune because we opened with very little money, and we had a double truck ad in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And for some reason, we opened on a Thursday, and we were expecting a lot of people to come in, and we had all of our people were out. My wife was out, Billy.
Right.
The wives of the other associates were out, handing out dollar bills. Every customer that came in, we gave you a dollar bill. She couldn't give it away. There was nobody coming. The ad didn't run. They just left it out. And they apologized for it afterwards. And, we could have threatened them with a lawsuit, et cetera, et cetera. I didn't. I just gave me a Jewish guilt trip. And I just made them feel so bad that they gave us the back page for a year. And that back page for a year helped make the Home Depot what it is today.
Indeed. Well, and Bernie, you also talk about not only did you all become successful, but you made the businesses of many of your vendors bear paint, right? That you wanted everyone to be successful. Why was that a good strategy?
Well, if we didn't have a supplier that could keep up with us. Now, when I started Home Depot, we dealt with paint manufacturers where the deliveries was every 8 weeks. Well, we were selling so much paint, we couldn't wait 8 weeks. And so we cut that supply chain down to dailies, like every 3 days, every 5 days. And these manufacturers had to follow us. And because they followed us, they became more successful.
Mm-hmm.
And so many companies out there, Georgia Pacific, all the big ones, all started smaller. And Home Depot helped them grow. And they helped themselves grow because they figured out ways to get product into our stores, because the more they got product into our stores, the more we sold. Therefore, they became more successful themselves, and they offered that service to their other customers. So we help the whole industry get bigger and better, and that's remained today, which is kind of amazing.
Well, Bernie, as we're kind of coming to the end of our conversation, I've been monitoring the chat and just how much love there is out there for you. One student, this is exactly what I needed because I was feeling lost this semester, and Bernie, you inspired me, just popped up on my screen. So if nothing else, you're a fantastic motivator. But I want to give, if anyone in the audience has a question they want to ask Bernie live, Aisha, I think we have a way to do that. I know sometimes it's a little hard to hear when we open it up, but if we could open it up to a student or two that might want to ask you a live question before we close it out.
Okay.
Let's see if Aisha, can we make that possible? Let's say raise your hand if you want to, and then they're just hundreds and hundreds of questions and comments, Bernie. Let's see. We've got someone. Okay, Daniel Mellon, it looks like. Aisha, can you make that work? Sometimes the technology goes a little slow.
I'm lost.
Yep. So while we're waiting for them to come on, let me sort of talk about an additional question. We talked about, did you know this was going to be a success? If you were giving someone 2 pieces of advice about starting a new company, what would those 2 things be?
Number 1, listen carefully. Number 2, set a goal that's achievable, but not the end. Make it a halfway point and keep moving the needle. Keep going with that goal. But the goal should always be out there. If you don't know who you want to be, you'll never be.
Indeed. Terrific advice. So I think we're still trying to figure out how to go live. But Bernie, I just want to read a few of these that kick up some dust. It's on Amazon. Everybody's sharing that. Thank you for the inspiration. Thank you for, it's the best talk that I've ever joined, says Nikki Hoffman. Thank you for your time. So appreciated. Okay, Aisha, do we have Daniel? Can't hear her on my end. So we may, I'm not hearing him. So we'll keep going maybe to one kind of final question that might surprise people. Bernie, you have Pit Bull, right? Your preface to your book, The Cuban Rapper. Now, nobody on this call is saying, gosh, how does Bernie Marcus know Pit Bull? But can you talk about your relationship with him and why he wrote the foreword to this book?
Yeah, about putting me in the same room with Pit Bull. How the hell did that happen? I mean, I think his music is crazy. I think he's crazy.
We love him.
But he's an entrepreneur, number 1. And number 2, he spends most of his life trying to build charter schools for Hispanics. And he's been very, very successful. And I met him through the charter school because I'm a great supporter of charter schools. And he and I taught classes together. And we got very, very friendly. And we found out that we had the same origins. We both grew up poor without anything. And he became an entrepreneur. I became an entrepreneur. He became wealthy. I became wealthy. And he's spending his time now helping other children. And believe me when I tell you they are really turning out some great kids that are getting great education, not from the public schools where you actually get nothing. And Pitbull is expanding that as much as he can, and we're helping him, and he's helping us as well.
Well, and Bernie, maybe we close with this at the very end of the preface. When we worked with Pitbull to write this, he says, Bernie and I have talked about a lot of things that really matter and how to make a difference. I tell him that my mother taught me you should never take no for an answer. I like it when people say you can't, you won't, you never will, because it lets me prove them wrong. Read this book, and you'll see that Bernie also believes that in every no is an opportunity. In can't, there's can, and don't, there's do. And in impossible, there's possible. Right? And he always has this great quote that's basically put in your batteries and get going. And his second great one is short steps, long vision. Or as Bernie would say it, you got to find the chutzpah to kick up some dust. So with that, Bernie Marcus, here at Coles College of Business at Kennesaw State University, we have been thrilled to have you today, Bernie. We've been on a book tour since October, and we've had a lot of great conversations, but this has been one of the best. And with that, I will hand it back to Dean Robin Jeremy to say thank you.
Thank you. Great to be with you again.
So much, Bernie and Catherine. This was fantastic. I mean, I was reading the comments as they were scrolling by and the questions, and I wish we had more time because there were so many students that really did want to learn from such experience that you have. But what stands out to me is the fact that every great leader and entrepreneur learns from their mistakes and their failures, and they just pick themselves back up. And that's such a fantastic lesson. And you've been a remarkable role model for so many others. So thank you all for being here today. I do want to remind the students a couple of quick things. On October 4th, we will have beignets with the dean. Bernie, you're welcome to join us. We'll have the first 100 students can come get beignets with me in the atrium. And on November 7th, we will have Stephanie Stuckey will be in our next Tetley series to talk about her family company at Stuckey's and the reinvention of that family business. So thanks again, Bernie, and thank you so much, Catherine. We were thrilled and honored to be with you today.
Truly our pleasure. Bernie, I think I can speak for us both. Robin, anytime you need us to come back, we're glad to do it.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Bye,
all.
everyone. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.